Greetings, all of you, and welcome to PEMReads. PEMReads is so glad to have you here, and thank you too for those of you that attended in October. Dan Lipkan did an amazing job leading us, reading I Tituba, and that was a great experience, as today will be too. So just welcome to all of our PEM friends. And thank you for coming today to explore a book that will certainly bring to us an eye-opening and meaningful conversation. Opium, How an Ancient Flower Shaped and Poisoned Our World. What a moving book this was. And it really exposed so many difficult and tragic truths, but led us to really consider our history. It is a book that's a deep exploration into the history of opium that author John Halpern notes is complex because, as Halpern noted at the very beginning, the physician's painkiller is the addict's poison. So this afternoon will be an opportunity for us to share ideas about the tumultuous effects of opium, from wars to the horrific present-day death counts. I was struck again by the video in the Healy Gallery every 11 minutes. We're so pleased to welcome Karina Corrigan, the Associate Director of Collections and the H.A. Crosby Forbes Curator of Asian Export Art. So glad to have Karina here, who will speak of PEM's Asian Export Art collection, and especially of the new gallery, and the process that the team followed to put together that outstanding exhibition. I was thinking back on a video blog post, actually, that Jean Goswami put out, I think about a year ago, and it was so insightful about the process of getting the exhibition together. And she wrote, "The transcultural objects of the gallery demonstrate the beauty and ingenuity that can be created through blending artistic traditions, materials, and technologies. But the new installation also addresses a darker side of the story, the uncomfortable truth that many of these works of art were originally purchased with profits derived from the illegal opium trade. During the 1800s, millions of Indian and Chinese lives were devastated by opium, a foreshadowing of today's opioid crisis." And then she continued to make a really important point that I think Karina can help us reflect on today. When the exhibition team assigned to work on the reinstallation of our Asian export art collection first came together to discuss our ideas for the gallery, it was clear that the toll of opium was top of mind. Opium had always lurked in the background of the story we told about global trade, but we had never fully addressed the truly central role it played, and we felt that the resonance with our present-day opioid crisis made that silence untenable. I was so moved to read this again, and I truly commend the PEM team, led by Karina, for the adherence to truth and the authenticity they brought to the process. And I'm so glad that Karina is here today to talk more about that and about our collection and to enlighten us more about this period of history. So Karina, I'm going to turn this over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. It's wonderful to be with you all this afternoon, and I'm really looking forward to being together in the breakout room so I can see your faces. I was thrilled when Amanda asked if I would participate in this PEMReads. This is obviously a topic that I've thought a lot about for a long time. I will say that when we were formally planning what ultimately became the Sean M. Healy Gallery for Asian Export Art on the second floor of the new building for about 3 years. But I've been at the museum for 23 years. And in many ways, this is the first large-scale gallery that we've had the opportunity to install in all of that time. And so I had had a lot of time to think about this. And I certainly, from the very beginning, had three goals for this gallery: to integrate Chinese, Japanese, and South Asian works of art from our collection, because those had always been siloed into separate galleries. I really wanted to incorporate textiles in the permanent gallery, because textiles are absolutely central to the subject of Asian export art. And the challenges with having textiles in a permanent gallery meant that we historically didn't have textiles on display. And I felt like that was not telling the full story. But really, more than almost anything else, was to try to figure out how to talk about this incredibly important aspect of American and British, particularly, engagement with India and China in the 18th and 19th century. And as Amanda said, this was a story that we didn't entirely ignore, but we certainly were not being as truthful as we could be about it. And so that really was the goal from the beginning. The final product is principally this 5-minute silent film in the middle of the gallery. And the team really spent a lot of time thinking about where this should be. And on multiple occasions, it seemed that there might be a better place for it to go in the gallery. And we really all felt that to put it in a corner was going to continue to do what we had done before, that it was essential that it be at the heart. But then also throughout the gallery, for individual works that are directly related to the opium trade, we've made a point to reference that. So for example, there's a spectacular painting by Balthazar Solvens, a late 18th century Flemish painter, and it's a beautiful painting of a boatyard in Calcutta on the day of the launching of a vessel that has been built in this boatyard by a British merchant. And we've exhibited that painting quite a lot. We had never previously specifically talked about the launching of that ship. That ship was a country ship, so-called country ship. And one of the primary purposes of that ship was to transport Indian opium to China for all of this trade. I do want to mention the team, because I think it's important that we really acknowledge that this was a collaborative effort in the gallery. Lon Morgan, the assistant curator on the project, Jean Goswami, who Amanda has mentioned, who was our interpretive partner, Jim Olson, our former director of integrated media, and Caitlin Lowry, who was our project manager. And we spent more time thinking about how to tell this story than almost any other story in the gallery. And we were nervous. I would say that the leadership was also nervous about how this story would play out when the public visited. And I've been incredibly heartened to see that almost to a person, it has been favorably received. So it's wonderful to be able to continue that conversation with this wonderful book. I just learned last night that John Halpern's mother and sister both live in Salem. So it just, it's amazing. We reference in the video the contemporary crisis as well, but the bulk of the story that we're telling currently in the gallery is about the historic engagement of trade in opium. But I do hope that with programs like this and potentially with engagement with contemporary artists or populations who are particularly impacted by this, that we can continue to tell the story and bring the story into the 21st century within the walls of the gallery as well as in this virtual space. So I think I have lots more to say, but I want to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda.
Thank you so much, Karina. And that's such a good point about continuing to think about how we can make this, this story relevant and lively and impactful and meaningful today. So I want to introduce Chris Reesk, who is now here on the screen. Welcome, Chris. and so glad to have you here. And I don't know if Mary Kay is there too, but hello, Mary Kay. There she is. If you're there also, we're thrilled to have Chris with us, as Chris has been with us. And Izzy, Chris's grandson, has been with us at PEMReads. Mary Kay has been with us. Chris, as many of you know, was an absolutely fantastic chief of philanthropy here at PEM for many years, and he is a friend and a key advisor for us now. Chris was also a professor, and as you can see from his background, has quite an extensive library. Chris is probably one of the most well-read people I know, and thinker, and we're just so glad to have you here, Chris, and we hope you just say a few words about the book and what you thought. So turning it over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm hoping you can hear me and see me. I'm still learning all of this, but I think it's working. Is it seem to be? Yeah.
Perfectly.
Well, when Mandy first and I were talking about my enthusiasm about the book, she asked if I'd make a 5-minute book report of sorts, and so I've tried that. And I'm going to kind of just jump right in and start by saying that I liked this book a lot. It was not overly scholarly, but it was highly informative and very thought-provoking. I like the fact that it's a very interdisciplinary book. It's a gateway into the history of science, especially when you think about botany and pharmacology. I also think it's a wonderful introduction to history, to the ways in which the book leads us into cultural anthropology. You think about the way the trade routes are discussed and the human consequences of their exchanged goods. It's a glimpse into the intersection of commerce and military history, particularly, of course, with the Opium Wars that Karina's been commenting on in the artwork, and also really right down through the Vietnam Wars and how addiction developed as the pain treated as medically and then becoming an addiction and continuing problem for so many veterans in this country, which we've been reading about in other places. I like the way the authors sort of proceed from ancient times to the present day, that chronological organization. And I also think that it has a real shift that takes place in the style of the book as it moves from colorful anecdotal presentation, presenting illumination of all the insidious ways in which opium has influenced the history of the world, shifting to a set of frightening, hammering facts about the ravages of the opioid crisis, both globally and here in America. It is in this shift that the authors move from history to advocacy and call for new efforts on the part of our governments, our social workers, our states, communities, legal systems to accelerate efforts to curtail opioid usage. I found the style of the writing to be quasi-journalistic, easy, accessible, flowing, attention-getting. Now with co-authorship, it's a bit harder sometimes to find a single authorial voice. But for me, I felt that there was a very believable storyteller undergirded by a practicing medical psychiatrist intimately familiar with patient care and treatment of addiction. And the combination of those, the storyteller and the psychiatrist with clinical experience made to me a very unique kind of voice for authorship. I think too that there's a consistent pattern in that voice that calls for us to realize that addiction is a disease and needs to be treated as any other physical disease or a disease that presents perhaps in a more acute way, like a heart attack or cancer, but it's just as much a disease. It's not, something we have to kind of move away from some of our stereotypical thinking about who uses drugs and who takes drugs, but to realize that there are people who are ill and we need to do more for them. The mostly chronological narrative structure is heavily strengthened and made dramatic through the constant use of examples and facts to illustrate points and to bring history alive. from Empress Shishi, whom we all remember, as Amanda remembers my grandson coming for one, Empress Shishi, another PEMReads group. We discussed that revisionist biography of her. And smoking her opium pipe peacefully in the evenings while, wreaking havoc throughout her empire during the day, but having those opium evenings, to Thomas de Quincey's remarkable account of his own drug experiences and confessions of an English opium eater, to a who's who parade of, quote, users. Gosh, they were stunning all the way through. I knew about some of them, like Coleridge and Wordsworth. I didn't know about Billie Holiday. I didn't know about Louisa May Alcott. I could have guessed about her, Edgar Allan Poe, having read Poe a lot. Even the numerous fascinating footnotes at times are mini dramas, as with the rendition of The Wizard of Oz as a text on addiction. There were so many interesting footnotes. When I began the book, by the way, I didn't bother with all the footnotes. And I started looking at them. And then the more I read into the book, I looked forward to them. I was reading all the footnotes, because it's a very kind of clever device, it's sort of, well, there's some other thing down here you might want to look at, and then you make it so interesting. Of course, you take it all the way through. On a personal note, Amanda doesn't know, but I'd like to just share that when I was at Boston University, as you were, I enrolled fully in a course in the BU Criminal Justice Program, an evening course, just out of long-time interest in criminology. I thought it'd be interesting to know more. And so I went at the nights, and most of the other students were police officers taking course credits to get promoted to whatever the next level was. But the teacher was the former head of corrections in Boston. And I learned a great deal in that course, as much as I've learned in any college course, especially about incarceration and sentencing guidelines. And of course, sentencing guidelines for drug use and dealing is a whole category in itself. And what struck me was how the laws kept changing constantly. The sentencing guidelines changed enormously, and we're still familiar with that problem today, even throughout this last election. So for me, I liked the fact that the final part of the book actually tied law and disorder, stating really a theme of the book. I enjoyed reading that because it was a very strong presentation about the complete failure of our legal systems, as well as the legal systems of other countries, to really do anything to control the catastrophic consequences of addiction from opium. And then there's greed. Greed comes out as a kind of strong topic of the book all the way through. And from the Shakers in nearby Mount Lebanon, New York, over here, to the West making and profiting from opium, relying on almost Dickensian London style child labor to have the children, spend countless required hours scraping the opium juice from the poppies to make their, quote, pain king solution and then sell it, right down to the Sacklers and the drug company giants of today. Greed, is the underlying thing that somehow has steadily made it possible for opportunities to maneuver, reinvent, and distribute products to the unsuspecting and the innocent. And there was a great deal of, I thought, solid information about how opium keeps morphing with the addition of different ingredients into different things, not just fentanyl, but a whole lot of other things that make it even scarier than I had certainly understood. So that's a kind of overview of the narration and the style, but let me just end with a couple of questions I'll toss out. I'm sure there are going to be lots today. One is from the book on page 244, where the authors ask the question, how do we create, quote, an expansion of addiction treatment? And he gives the example of the so-called MAT, or medication-assisted treatment, MAT, described as available in Boston, but very few other places where an addict can go and actually receive actual treatment right off the top. And then a second question, one I've been turning over on my mind, well, it sort of has two sides. It's, all right, so the law systems have failed in many ways, and maybe there is really room here and need here for two other avenues. One, Karina has already put her hands on, and I was just wondering, of course, how our museum, our wonderful PEM, might become more useful, might become a tool in helping both treatment and reduction of the problem with our collections and with our education programs. So Karina, thank you for that pathway. I think if you could do some huddling with some of your colleagues at PEM and some others, that you could really find, I think, some new things that PEM might do to engage a different group of stakeholders. And then a last and similar question to what PEM might do, I've been pondering, just because of our interests, Mary Kay and I, in our church and theology and Bible study things, is whether there couldn't be a coordinated effort among a lot of different religious denominations to do something together about this big problem. And maybe religion, in quotes, could succeed where law has failed. So that's my runway into a broader set of thinking here from everybody. But thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. I'm not a professor anymore, so and for me to do 5 minutes is great fun. Thank you.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much. Wonderfully professorial, but even more importantly, just I think you really defined the human dynamic, the human problem here. And I think one of your key points that we need to recognize that this is an illness like cancer, like other illnesses, and move beyond to find the right kind of treatment is just really powerful. So thank you so much. And you're diving in both with questions and the style of writing. You know, I want to be part of your breakout room. I think that's fantastic.
I want Mary Kay to be able to say hi. I feel so funny.
Here's Mary Kay. Hi.
If we back up, you'll see us both.
Oh, it's fine.
Well, thank you. Mary Kay, we could feel your hand in that too. So that was wonderful. And thank you so much. We really
Nice
appreciate
to
it.
be talking with you both.
Yeah.
Oh, it was fabulous. What an important topic, and one we can continue to explore together. There are a number of folks in our room who suggested different books, so we'll circulate that to all of you. So thank you so much. I want to thank Karina. You were amazing, as you always are, and just gave us such an insight into what putting the exhibition together in the New Wing was like. It was that was a wonderful walkthrough, and we just again so appreciate the authenticity you bring to everything you do.
Let's hope to be in the gallery together someday soon.
Oh, I know, we do miss you all, we really do. I'm going to turn it over to Carrie now to talk about our next book.
Okay, so our next book for PEMReads, which will be on February 3rd, 2021, is The Overstory, which is a novel by Richard Powers, published in 2018. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2019. And the novel's about 9 Americans whose unique life experiences with trees bring them together to address the destruction of forests. Powers was inspired to write the book while teaching at Stanford University after he encountered giant redwood trees for the first time. And Janie Winchell, who's PEM's Sarah Fraser Robbins director of the Dottie Brown Art and Nature Center, will be our guest speaker. And she's curating a climate action exhibition at PEM in 2021. So we're so excited to have Janie and to read the book and discuss it together. And we'll be sure to send an invitation to you all soon.
And so on that note, we wish all of you a socially distanced end of 2020, and good riddance 2020, and a happy new year, and hopefully 2021 will bring us all back together again. Thank you for sharing your ideas, for bringing your whole selves to these conversations, and keep coming to PEMReads. We love having you. We love the exploration of ideas and sharing together. So thank you very much to all of you.